In this video, I'm looking at a Bible that I've had various people request me to review. I think particularly to talk a little bit about this update of the King James Version or modification of the King James Version. And the publisher for this, Barber Publishing, I think it is, kindly sent me a copy for review. And I also have good news that I talked to them about having a representative come on the channel to talk more about the Simplified King James Version project and the editions that they have available and talk about this in more detail. So stay tuned for that. That person should be coming on toward the end of February 2026. But looking at what they sent me here, this will give you an idea of the quality and the style of what they're producing. It says the Barber Simplified King James Version Bible, large print. And you have on the side here the Barber Publishing logo. The back here gives the retail price as $45.99. So again, this is large print edition. And you can see the cover here. This is going to be, I think, an imitation leather cover. They do say it's a rust and stone cross. So if you're looking for this particular style, that's what it's called. And if you want to understand what this Simplified King James Version is, this tells you here the overview. You have outdated verb styles are refreshed. So art becomes are, gavest becomes gave. Old forms of address like thee, thou, and ye are updated. Confusing older terms such as wroth or diverse are modernized. Pronouns for God such as he, his, him, you, yours, me, my are capitalized for clarity. Question marks are included with spoken language. To me, that's one of the best features. And even if they did no other modifications to the King James, that would make it so much easier to read for a lot of people. Long sentences are shortened with modern punctuation. Paragraphs are added throughout. And that's another very noticeable feature in this Bible, which you don't typically see with the King James Version, is paragraph formatting. It says the Simplified King James Version Bible maintains the feel of the original King James while noticeably increasing its readability, bringing the trustworthy old translation into the 21st century. This is not the first effort to do something like that. However, they seem to be getting noticed because, as I said, I've had people ask me to do reviews of this Bible. So there you go. It's in this slip case that you put the Bible in and out from the top. And then looking at this in more detail here, this cover, it is an imitation leather, as I said. It says on the top here, SKJV, so that's how they identify the Simplified King James SKJV, similar to NKJV, but a little bit different. The Barber Simplified King James Bible, large print. You do see you've got tooled hubs there separating the text. You also have some perimeter stitching and stitching kind of in the middle here for decorative purposes. And because you have two different types of imitation leather here, you have this brown tan or marbled kind of a brown look, and then you have something that I'm not even sure, bluish on the side here. So really nice looking cover, ISBN number printed on the back bottom right hand corner. This one also is thumb indexed, and I didn't specify exactly which one for them to send to me, so they sent me a very nice copy. Let's look at the size here. This is large print, so it's going to be probably a little bit larger Bible, 9.5 on the cover here by close to 7 inches wide and about 1 3/4 inches thick, somewhere around there. So not bad. To me, it kind of, I don't know if it's because of the way the cover's done, it kind of feels a little bit wide. I think I said it was around 7 inches wide. So to me, it may be a little bit wider than a lot of Bibles in its proportions, but really still easy to hold. I know a lot of people, if they need a large print Bible, would love to be able to carry something like this. It has gold page edges. You can see there is a ribbon here, so we're going to pull that ribbon out. And the ribbon itself is just a narrow angle cut, and it looks like single-sided ribbon. So one thing, if the publisher ever watches this video, I know a lot of people now, they've gotten very used to Bibles being produced with at least 2, maybe 3 ribbons, and people really like that. So that might be an improvement for future editions, is to put more ribbons, and also the wider ribbons if you have a larger Bible like this. It looks nice, and it is functional to have various ribbons. Even my son was telling me how one of the things he likes about the higher end Bibles is that you get multiple ribbons. So that's actually not too expensive of an improvement that could be made. But what about the Bible itself? As we get in here, this reminds me of a lot of other publishers. You have a title page on kind of a coated cardstock, same as the liner, it seems like here. And then you have the title page, and it does say it's a red letter edition, which a lot of King James Bibles are, for the words of Christ. Looking inside here, this one actually has a copyright of 2022 and 2025 by Barber Publishing. So that's interesting. Now, in the bottom here, it says it's printed in China, as a lot of Bibles are. If they're going to be affordable, that's an option a lot of publishers go with. But China can produce some very nice Bibles, so we'll see what the quality's like. Just looking at the contents page here, I am noticing a decent amount of ghosting. But it is large print, seems to be easy to read. So that's a look at the contents. You do see in the back here they have something about the Simplified King James Version revision process. So if you're really curious to know, you can get one of these Bibles and read through that and really learn a lot. They also have a dictionary concordance in the back. So we'll leaf through here and take a look at some of these features. You've got the books of the Bible in alphabetical order. Here's kind of an introduction, and again you have a list of what they have done in order to make the King James Version easier to read. Now, I think you can tell that the idea behind this Bible is to make something available to people who trust the King James Version and love the King James Version, but maybe they have a hard time understanding it. So this is going to be something to help people out. This Old Testament print here, this title page for the Old Testament, it kind of reminds me of, I can't think of which translation has a font a lot like this, but maybe in the comments you can help me out with that. It's something from 2K Denmark. I don't think that this was designed by 2K Denmark, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I didn't notice that on the title, on the copyright page. You do have an introduction to the book, so that's a really good thing. And getting in here, you see paragraph formatting for the King James. So if you're looking for a paragraph set King James Bible that's pretty affordable, this is something that would be useful. I think it would pair well if you already have another King James Version that you really love that's in the original format, but you want something that is simplified some so you can compare. This is that's what this is for. But this could also just be a main Bible for people as well. Now, the King James Bible, I've talked about it on my channel. It is a historic translation. It's incredibly influential in the history of English-speaking Christianity. And it has tremendous heritage and spiritual significance for many of us, myself included. I grew up with the King James Version. It is not my primary translation today, but I still think it has great value and people should own and use King James Bibles. And this, I think, just makes it accessible to more people because there might be younger people that want to read the King James, get more used to reading the King James. This might be a stepping stone to do that. Or it might be people that have been reading the King James and they could really benefit from something like this. I notice with King James users, they can be very wary of any changes to the King James. Some of you watching this video might be one of those people typing comments in the comment section right now. But again, this is not any kind of a major update. This is really just trying to simplify it some. And so I'm not seeing footnotes on the bottom here, anything that is going to be controversial in this other than the changes to the text itself. But again, a lot of that's just formatting and some updating of obscure words. Now, actually, the ghosting in this is really mitigated. It's not as bad as it could be because I would say this looks line matched. The lines on each side of the page match. So that's really helping. The only time I'm really noticing ghosting is more with these introductory pages here, book introductions. You're going to see it also more with writing like this, poetry, for example, places where you have more white space on the page. So let's get to the poetry so we can see how that looks. Now, it is interesting. This is verse by verse in the book of Psalms, but it's not in what I would call stanza setting, where you kind of separate the poetry out to look like poetry. It really just kind of has more the old style verse by verse look to it. But that's different than the prose in this Bible, which is going to be in paragraph format. So they went to that verse by verse format in the book of Psalms and in the book of Proverbs. Ecclesiastes is paragraph. Song of Solomon is verse by verse. I didn't look at Job, so let's go back and look at the book of Job and see how they formatted that. Job is in paragraph formatting. That's interesting because Job actually has poetry. But, I understand. Job is more of a story form book, whereas Psalms is clearly something that was done in verse form in terms of it being poetic. Proverbs, similar. So again, Song of Solomon, verse by verse. Then we're in the book of Isaiah here. And they do have some verse by verse in the book of Isaiah. Very interesting. So that is so interesting that in Isaiah, it has paragraph and verse by verse. Let me look again at Job, because I do want to make sure that I am giving the correct information. I'm not seeing any verse by verse in Job. Okay, that's interesting. But it looks like in the prophets, you're going to maybe get a combination, at least in Isaiah. Okay, Jeremiah looks like it's all paragraph formatting. That is interesting. So when I have the representative on my channel, that might be something I can ask. And if you're watching and I forget to ask, you could ask that as well, or any other questions you have. Again, that should be a live show that we have on my channel at the end of February 2026. Lamentations is in verse by verse. Okay. So, really interesting. Let's get to the New Testament. We do have a title page for the New Testament and another book introduction. And the book introductions have just kind of a general introduction, something about the author and the occasion, the circumstances of why it was written, when it was written. Then you have Matthew beginning with the genealogy. So it might be helpful to people just to see some familiar passages and see how they read. I know some of you would like to get a very extensive look at that. I'm just kind of giving an overview in this video, but let's see this here. It says in Matthew 2, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." So, reads very much like the King James Version. Here you have in In the Gospel of Matthew, words of Christ in red, and the red looks, I think, pretty good. It's not the darkest red, but it's not distractingly light. It doesn't seem washed out. I guess, in person here, it's a little bit on that lighter side than I would prefer, but you can tell on the camera. I mean, it's still crisply printed and pretty easy to read. And a lot of King James users like red letter. They're used to that. That being said, when you have quotation marks, like you see here, Jesus talking, and there's quotation marks there, that actually makes the red letter a little bit less necessary, if that makes sense. Because one of the reasons red letter is helpful in the King James is because it doesn't have quotation marks. And so if you really want to know exactly where Jesus is talking at a glance, having the red letter helps. That being said, a lot of people love the red letter because they're used to it. And it just, to them, it's a feature they like. You see here, the verses are always printed in black print. So I think that's always a nice touch. When they take the time, even if they do red letter, not to just suddenly change everything to red. Verses are always going to be in kind of a little bit of a bolder print in black. And the section headings look very nice. Easy to pick out here. So, I mean, what a great format. I'm actually very impressed with this. I think this is very useful. Now, if we go to Luke, just because, again, I want to look at passages in this Bible that people are familiar with, and people are very familiar with the birth of Christ passages. So here's another one, Luke 2, and it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this enrollment was first made when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Okay, going down to verse 8. In the same country there were shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. So I think that would be one where I believe the King James says they were sore afraid. They were greatly afraid. So a little bit of modification there, but I mean, it reads a lot like that traditional sound that we're used to. Another verse, of course, that people are very familiar with is John 3:16. And I would imagine that this is pretty much untouched, other than punctuation. So going to John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Okay, now I grew up with the King James Version, so I think I remember this right, that it should read, at least in the original edition, it would say that whosoever believes in him, right? Whereas this say whoever, so that's just a little bit of an updated rendering there. I can see why they did that. So let me know in the comments what you think. I don't mind that at all. So pretty much the same. But again, light modification of wording. Now what about Psalm 23? We'll go back to the book of Psalms. Psalm 23. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul." So it actually reminds me a lot of the New King James there. It might be almost exactly the same wording, because really they're just taking out the ETH type endings. So instead of he maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. Instead of he leadeth me beside the still waters, he leads me beside the still waters. So I know, to some of you, you don't prefer that. You actually, if you're going to have the King James, you have no problem reading it in the older style English. There are a lot of people, though, who that does make it hard for them to understand. So I can see why they would make a Bible like this. And I personally, I've been someone who says that Bibles, at some point, they do need to be updated. I know that can be controversial, and I might need to do more videos to talk about that because that's a very controversial thing to some people. But I'm not talking about updating the original language. Something to think about is that the King James Version was an update of the Bishop's Bible. So the King James translators were updating a translation, and that's how we got the King James. And a lot of the editions of the King James that are used today, I believe, are from 1769, an update. And yes, they might have just been spelling updates or whatever, but that's the point, is that there are things that eventually become harder for people to understand and use. Things that were conventions at one time become harder to use at a later time. But certainly language. This tells you about the Simplified King James Version revision process. And looking at this in detail, you can actually see lots of words listed out here. That's really interesting. So they give you some good details here about the changes that they made. And it says it's not a complete list, nor have these changes been applied globally. So they're trying to be as transparent as possible. But for people who are a little bit skeptical about changes, this is going to help you understand the changes they made. They're being very upfront about it. It's not an exhaustive list, but it will give you a good idea of the changes that they made. And so you have quite a few of those. So really, it's a pretty simple explanation of the updating process, it looks like, because a lot of these pages are just showing the older wording with the newer wording. And it's pretty interesting. Yeah. You can take a look for yourself. They can be pretty minor, these changes. Some of these are place names or people names. Really interesting. And it may be that in the New Testament, I didn't actually look at that. It may be in the New Testament that you're going to have some of those changes where I think in the King James Version, they tended to use names like Zacharias, for example. So maybe they changed that to Zechariah. So I can say in this Bible here, it says his father, Zechariah, was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied. So we do have here in the New Testament Zechariah, and I think in the King James, those names in the New Testament would read a little differently. So I think they're bringing more consistency from the Old Testament spellings to the New Testament is what you have going on there. All right, so after the explanation, you also have a dictionary, Concordance, and it looks pretty extensive there. Interesting the way that this is done. It's not so much listing out lots of references. It's more talking about, kind of a definition of each word along with some references. One of the Testament word here, one of 2 volumes of sacred scriptures which treat of the Old and New dispensations, distinguished as the Old Testament, treating of the revelation before the advent of Christ, and the New Testament containing that made after the advent. All right, so that's the dictionary Concordance. And finally, we have color maps on glossy cardstock paper. And looking at these, I mean, they are okay. I do like the fact that you see some topography here. I like the texture, seeing the landscape. The coloring isn't my favorite. That green almost looks neonish. But I've gotten used to other maps from other Bible publishers, so I'm not saying this is bad, just not my favorite color scheme, that's all. But very useful. We have here Paul's voyage to Rome. That's interesting. So there are some maps in the back here. Churches of Revelation is the final one, but I didn't notice all of Paul's missionary journeys. Okay, so the maps are okay. I think some improvements could be made with those as well. But that's a look at a Bible that I think a lot of people were interested in and are going to be interested in. It is the Barber Simplified King James Version Bible, the large print edition. Again, I'm going to have a rep come on and talk more about this Bible modification of the King James Version. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions or comments about this, I'd love to see that in the comments section. But thank you so much for taking a look at this with me from a fresh perspective.